Thanks for having us. Since we have 15 minutes, I'll be brief and turn it over to Mark, and then we'll save maybe 14 minutes for your questions. Maybe not that brief. So I'll tell you a little story. We're both first-term members, and about a year and a half ago, kind of the campaigns are getting rolling, and we had a couple people on our staff who were trying to look up some of the incumbents by opponents' voting records in Richmond, just to see what there might be and whether there should be any issues in the campaign. And I kind of like doing it myself, because I'm sort of hands-on that way. I figured it's going to be easy. We just find somewhere on that General Assembly website, type in his last name, hit return, all votes come up. Must be somewhere. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. You had to go find the bills that everybody voted on, look them all up one at a time. And that was not only maybe a few hours project, that was clearly going to be a weeks and maybe even a month or two project for a couple of enterprising interns on the campaign staff. So, you know, a cynical person would say that the website was actually designed that way on purpose. Yeah, but I wasn't that way until I actually came down to Richmond to find out that it was true. Actually, before I came down to Richmond, because of this experience, and a couple of other things during the campaign where there were a couple of votes that my opponent had that maybe he didn't want too many people to know about, I said, you know what, first bill, I had a reporter call me up and said, we're doing a little story here, what's the first bill you're going to introduce, Mr. LeMunyon? It really caught me off guard. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in a bill that says you're going to put voting records on the General Assembly's website and indexed by member name. Just type a member's name in and you'll be able to look them all up. Well, they gobbled that up. That sounded great. And the more I thought about it, it did sound great. So in fact, that was the first bill. Mark is the principal co-sponsor, or co-patron, as they say in Richmond, not Washington. And it was House Bill 778. I think Mark's got some copies, and if those are not enough, I've got a few more. I'll let Mark tell you the gory details of kind of how things happened, but one of the reasons, and I think it was mentioned in the intro, that we're here today is we're going to do this again next year. We're going to try to get a Senate sponsor. You know, when you're new and then you win and then you got to figure out what you're going to do, you don't have a whole lot of time to kind of work the crowd before the session starts. So we're doing that this year. And what we'd really like to do different is to have some kind of a letter sent to members of the House and Senate, signed by a wide range of organizations, whether they're labor, the Chamber of Commerce, teachers. I see some great organizations on this list here. League of Women Voters, the Press Association, where's the other one? Broadcasters Association. We'd love to have those groups endorse this bill and say this is not Republican, not Democrat, it's just common sense. And if you're interested in working with us on that, we'd love to work with you on that and see if we can get this through both houses of the General Assembly this year and get implemented in 2012. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and then we'll do questions.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And first of all, thanks, Megan and the organizers of this conference for inviting us. I know this is kind of a last-minute shoehorning of our own agenda into your schedule, but we really appreciate you allowing us to have a few minutes of your time. And I was actually interested in coming down here and observing, just like our colleague Richard Anderson over there. We were just planning on coming down and observing and learning anyway, because this is an issue that both Jim and I are passionate about, the idea of transparency, the idea that we ought to know what the government's doing, and especially for folks like us who serve in the government now and in the taxpayer-funded jobs, you need to know what we do and vice versa. And so we thought that we would just spend some time here anyway. But when we thought about the opportunity to maybe even have a chance to talk to you about the one bill that we worked on together, we thought, well, that'd be great if we can spend a couple minutes and just maybe lobby you. I know you learned about lobbying us earlier in the session today, but this is a chance for us to lobby you, to ask you to help us with our job. As I walked into this room, it reminded me that when Jim and I first talked about this bill, it was actually in this room during our orientation, our freshman orientation back in, I guess, was it early January, or December or January. We had a couple of sessions here. And we're sitting here, and Jim and I just accidentally happened to sit next to each other, and we knew each other from the campaign, different side of the aisles and different parts of the Oakton. He was one side of Oakton, and I had the other side. But we got talking, and we said, you know, the campaign's over, let's talk about governing, and where can we find common ground? And he mentioned this idea, and I said, don't we do this already? And I had the same reaction, it's just technology's there. I happen to work in the technology industry, and I've also worked in the US Congress as well, so I'm familiar with the idea that people can look up information. I said, well, let's make the government provide that information for free so that folks don't have to go on and look for enrichment sunlight or something like that to provide you that information. And lo and behold, not only did we not provide it, but in some ways, we as in the General Assembly makes it as hard as possible for people to find the information, where if you just want to find out how Mark Keam voted on some bill, instead of looking at my name and seeing how I voted, you'd have to know what the bill number was, which committee it went to, who introduced it, when it came up, maybe a keyword that's part of the bill. And if you got to that point, you would be able to search the entire information about subcommittee, full committee, and so on. And so we thought, we should really make this easier. And so that's the genesis of the bill. And it did go through the House. We had a little bit of a back and forth between some of our more senior members who wanted to understand how this bill worked, but we were by and large able to get this through on a bipartisan basis. And I was very proud, especially to note that of the 20 members of the freshman class who entered in January, all 20 of us, bipartisan across the entire Commonwealth, all signed on as original co-sponsors because we thought this is a way we ought to do business in Virginia. And incidentally, and the last speaker was talking about social media, we also noticed that of the 20 new members, we all use some form of social media. We also use laptops. We also use the idea of talking to people, our constituents, by email and by Facebook. And so maybe it's more of a, I don't want to use the word generational because it has different connotations, but maybe it is a bit of a kind of a timing that people who read for the first time this past cycle understood the importance of social media and technology and transparency in that light. And so for us, it was a very easy decision to say, yeah, this makes sense. Having said all that, once the bill went through the House and it went overwhelming bipartisan support, when it went to the Senate, we encountered some problems on that side, and it really wasn't, from my perspective, a partisan issue. It certainly wasn't some kind of philosophical or ideological or even a regional or geographic issue. I think it really was the Senate just didn't want the House folks like us telling them what to do, and folks in the Senate just not wanting to change things because they're just used to the way things are. Which I respect that, I understand that, but change is difficult. And we're hoping that this change will come. Just like when we had cameras in the chambers a few years ago, it took a while before it happened. And you all know what C-SPAN did for U.S. Congress. Maybe it's not the best thing, but at least it happened. So the idea of bringing sunshine and transparency into the government is a slow but sure opportunity for us to do that. So we're hoping that this bill is going to be one opportunity. So if I can, I'd like to just pass this out. On the one side is just a quick explanation of the bill. On the other side is we try to save paper as well. The other side is an op-ed that Jim was kind enough to ask me to join him on an op-ed that we published in the Washington Post. So basically it's a simple concept that says, let's do this for the benefit of the citizens, and we're really hoping that in the 2011 cycle that we could get this done, and whatever you all can do to help us, we can certainly appreciate that. And Jim and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have, or to go beyond this issue and talk about any other transparency issues as well.
It depends on how the web designers actually do the detailed work. I don't think it adds any more complexity, or shouldn't add any more complexity than we have today when you look up the bill by the number. You want to look up HB 1234, you can. Might be substitutes, multiple votes, the nature of the bill change, all that's still true. None of that changes. It's just a question of, can you find out at all whether Mark or Jim voted on HB 1234 and how? And if you didn't know the bill number, you wouldn't know. That's all we're trying to change here. I would hope that the software folks, when they get to it, don't make it any more complicated than that.
Well, frankly, I think that the simple answer to your question is, it is a good question, but the simple answer, I think, is our goal is not to do anything more than just make the bare minimum information available to everyone at the right, easiest platform possible. What you do with that is completely up to you all. You can get to the same result now. It's not difficult, it's not impossible. Every organization that does the legislative report cards, you all do this anyway. We just thought, as a matter of government service, let's try to make it as efficient and accountable and easy as possible, and then once you can have that information, do what you will with it. From our perspective, and Jim and I think agree on this, we just think that this is absolutely the most fundamental, basic aspect of transparency. What you do with this afterwards becomes the political campaign issues and what have you, but that's something that we obviously, each of us will do whatever we need to do for our own advocacy as well as for our own campaigns. But at a minimum, the government's role ought to be able to provide information that's basic.
They told me they know how to do this. They could do it in the ordinary course of updating the website as they do maybe a couple times a year or more, and it's no big deal. It's that they sort of said they were told not to do it. And it won't cost a penny.